Welcome to Salem, 1692. Mud clings to your boots again. That's the third pair ruined this month. Not that you had many to begin with. It rains often, and when it doesn't, the ground still finds ways to stay wet. The roads are more like suggestions. You don't travel quickly. You travel carefully, 1 foot at a time, hoping not to slip, praying not to run into anyone who's in the mood for conversation. These days, conversation is dangerous. The air smells like wood smoke and sheep, with a faint undercurrent of something sour you stopped identifying months ago. You've grown used to it, the same way you've grown used to the cold in your joints and the strange silence that settles over the village just after sundown. A silence not born of peace but of watching, listening, worrying. You used to think winter was the hardest part of the year. Now you know better. Winter is just honest. It tries to kill you directly. The rest of the year is more subtle. You live in Salem Village, not Salem Town. That's different. Town has merchants, docks and people who smile too easily. The village is holier, or so everyone keeps insisting. More devout, more upright, more tired. You see the same faces every day, bent over fields, nodding silently in the meeting house, murmuring prayers as they pass you by without looking up. Nobody wants to be seen looking. Nobody wants to be the last person to hear the newest whisper. Gossip is safer when it comes from someone else's mouth. Your house is small. Most are. Cold with a roof that leaks only when it rains, which is to say often. The hearth is the only real source of heat, and the firewood supply is an ongoing exercise in hope. You sleep under 3 layers of wool, 2 of which smell faintly of mildew, and 1 of which used to belong to your aunt before the fever took her. You've stopped minding. Everything here smells like something else, and all of it smells like God has been testing you for years and hasn't found a reason to stop. Church is not optional. It is not uplifting. It is not soothing. It is long, cold, and full of shouting. Reverend Paris stands in the pulpit, like a man trying to win an argument with Satan directly. His sermons are fire and judgment and eyes that seem to rest just a little too long on certain people. He does not smile. You are not supposed to either. Laughter is not holy. Laughter invites questions. And questions invite suspicion. God sees everything. This is not a comforting thought. It means your thoughts are never private. It means your doubts are already known. The devil sees too, of course, but unlike God, he tends to act on his observations. That's what they say, at least. That's what they preach. That the devil is always near, looking for a way in. A cracked door, a rebellious child, a woman who knows too many herbs, a man who skips church twice in a row, a neighbour who doesn't flinch when others do. You try to be good. Everyone tries. But goodness here is measured in silence and obedience. You don't speak unless asked. You don't question authority. You definitely don't suggest alternative explanations for anything that's gone wrong. A sick cow, a cursed field, a stillborn child. Something brought that on. Something, or someone, has allowed evil in. You pray it isn't you. You pray no one thinks it is. The girls began twitching last week. At first, everyone assumed it was fits or nerves, or that old family curse they don't talk about aloud. But then came the screaming, the accusations, the names. Girls speaking in voices not their own, pointing fingers at shadows only they can see. It would be ridiculous if it weren't so terrifying. They are children, but they are also vessels of truth now, or so the Reverend says. Their word is scripture. Their tears are evidence. Their dreams are admissible in court. People have started to vanish, quietly at first. A neighbour taken in for questioning. A widow bound at the wrists and led to the meeting house. An old man with cloudy eyes and no teeth, who apparently confessed before anyone asked him to. The jail is filling. The gallows have been tested. The rope is ready. So are the people. The thing you learn quickly is this: innocence doesn't help. Guilt isn't proven, it's assigned. And once it has your name on it, there's no clean way back. You could confess, but that means lying. And lying is a sin. But not confessing, well, that's pride, also a sin. The logic folds in on itself like poorly kneaded dough. No matter how you twist it, you come out damned. The rules are simple and also incomprehensible. If you cry, you're pretending. If you don't, you're heartless. If you accuse someone else, you might live. If you say nothing, you're probably next. The safest thing to be is forgettable. And even that isn't very safe anymore. The devil is everywhere, they say. In the trees, in your dreams, in the shape of a bird that landed too close to the well. He walks through the village, in borrowed skin. He whispers to children and makes them writhe on the floor and curse their elders. And someone nearby, invited him in. So the search begins, and continues, and accelerates. Because once a fire starts, it doesn't matter who lit it. It only matters that everyone sees the smoke. You go to bed early now. You pretend to sleep even when you can't. You keep your hands folded, your voice low, your opinions buried so deep they can't find daylight. You rehearse answers to questions no one has asked yet. You watch your neighbours and wonder who's next. You wonder what they're wondering about you. There's no separation between life and faith in Salem. God is not part of your daily routine. He is the routine. Every action is either righteous or wicked. Every breath you take must be accounted for. You pray before meals, before sleep, during storms, after sneezes, and in the vague hope that maybe, just maybe, the world won't end before your next harvest. The sermons don't offer comfort. They offer warnings. Lengthy, graphic, and loud ones. There is no church as a building distinct from the town. The meeting house is the centre of everything, a place where God and government are indistinguishable. The minister holds more power than the constable, and certainly more than you. He doesn't need to know you personally to judge your soul. He just needs to see your face during his 4th hour of preaching to know whether or not you're harbouring sin. Spoiler, you are. You were born with it after all. Original sin is the one inheritance you can't lose in a fire. You can't opt out of it. The best you can do is live in such a way that maybe, at the end of your life, God will consider sparing you the worst corner of eternal torment. That's the dream. Not heaven, just a slightly less awful hell. Comfort is not the goal. Obedience is. Survival comes second. Forgiveness, if you're lucky, might arrive after death, provided you've endured enough suffering to earn it. The devil is real. Everyone knows this. He's not metaphorical, not a literary concept, not a vague sense of moral wrongness. He's a creature, cunning and active, walking unseen among you. He doesn't wear horns. He doesn't announce himself. He whispers. He takes the form of a friend, a bird, a black cat, a stranger in the night. He tempts you with laziness, pride, lust, thoughts that don't belong in polite company. You've probably invited him in without realising it. A muttered complaint, a skipped prayer, a second helping of stew. But Satan doesn't work alone. He needs servants, witches, those who have given themselves over to his will in exchange for worldly gain. This gain could be something enormous: wealth, power, a cow that doesn't die in January. Or it could be something as petty as revenge on a rude neighbour. And the terrifying part is that anyone could be won. Your midwife, your cousin, the man who didn't look you in the eye last week, the old woman who talks to her chickens. You, if someone tells the right story, with the right tone to the right person. And when life starts to turn, when crops fail, and children fall ill, and frost comes too early, it's easier to believe a witch did it than to believe that suffering is just part of life. After all, God wouldn't punish the righteous unless someone nearby had given him a reason. Your personal guilt doesn't cancel out the possibility of someone else's. There's no such thing as collective innocence, only collective consequences. You live in a house where guilt is a frequent guest, not dramatic guilt, Not the kind you confess in tears at the altar. Just the quiet, ordinary guilt of not being enough, not good enough, not grateful enough, not pious enough. You haven't memorized the longer catechism. You let your thoughts wander during prayer. You grumbled about the neighbour's cow braying all night. These seem small, but in Salem, small things become big things when left unattended. And even thinking too much about yourself, your wants, your fears, is pride. And pride, well, that's practically a handshake with Lucifer. You rub goose fat on your hands at night, not because it heals, but because it helps the skin split more slowly in winter. You chew roots when your teeth ache and apply mustard plasters when your chest burns with fever. If you're lucky, someone in your family remembers which herbs soothe a burn and which ones cause seizures. If you're not, you experiment once. The closest thing to a physician is 2 towns over and costs more than you make in a month. And God forbid you actually feel better after something not prescribed by a minister or approved by the town. That smells like witchcraft, especially if you're a woman. If you're a man, your failures are between you and God. If you're a woman, your failures are between you and everyone. You are judged not only for your own soul, but for the souls of those around you, your children's behaviour, your husband's piety, your neighbour's gossip. You're expected to be obedient, modest, helpful, and above all, quiet. You don't need an education. You need a strong back and a willingness to disappear behind a smile and a basket of laundry. And if you don't, if your voice is too strong, your opinions too sharp, your presence too inconvenient, people begin to wonder. Why hasn't she remarried? Why does she spend so much time alone? Why did her bread rise when everyone else has failed? You live tightly, food is scarce, luxuries are rare. You share a bed, maybe 2, between 5 people. You eat what can be grown, caught, or begged. Salt is precious. Sugar is a fantasy. You make do with dried apples and cold porridge, and if it's too thin, you pretend it's for piety, not necessity. You cover your head. You cover your ankles. You cover your thoughts. And when a child laughs too loudly, you hush them, not out of cruelty, but out of fear that someone might hear and think you're enjoying life too much. That kind of thing invites attention. The dark isn't just inconvenient, it's meaningful. Night belongs to the devil. Most good folk are indoors after sunset. Lamps burn low, oil is rationed, and shadows stretch longer than they should. You don't wander. You don't open the door unless you expect a visitor. And even then, you keep your hand near the latch. Every creak of the wood outside, every distant footstep, makes your stomach tighten. You tell yourself, it's the wind, or a dog, or the neighbour's boy. But you still keep the fire burning a little longer, just in case. So you live a life held together by prayer, goose fat, and the distant hope that nobody notices you long enough to form an opinion. You scrape your knees in church, fold your hands in public, and keep your suspicions about others locked behind your teeth. Because you've seen how fast things shift. One moment, you're blessing the bread. The next, you're being asked about a dream someone else had. A dream that somehow features your face. And here, in Salem, that's all it takes. It starts with a glance, a whispered word, a child's fit that doesn't look quite right. Then another. Then another. One of them points a shaking hand at someone across the room. Her voice warbles as she claims a dark shape sits on your shoulder, whispering secrets. The room goes quiet. Eyes turn to you. You weren't speaking. You weren't even standing close enough to be accused of anything. And yet, here we are. You try to laugh it off, but no one else is laughing. You feel a pit open in your stomach as the minister's gaze settles on you like a weight. You try to recall if you've ever quarrelled with this girl's family. You remember that your fence borders theirs, that their goat wandered into your garden once, that you shooed it with a broom, that you didn't apologise, that you shouldn't have to. But maybe you should have, because now you're being asked questions you don't quite understand. Have you seen strange animals near your home? Do your dreams trouble you? Have you felt an unnatural cold? Do Do you read? Do you know your 10 commandments? Backwards? There are no right answers. The more you say, the worse it gets. If you speak too plainly, you're too confident, clearly in league with evil. If you hesitate, you're hiding something. If you cry, you're trying to manipulate. If you don't, you lack remorse. If you defend yourself, you're unrepentant. If you stay silent, you're obviously guilty. You're not on trial yet, not officially, but it doesn't matter. Salem isn't about formalities right now. It's about momentum. Someone has pointed, someone else has nodded. That's how it begins. No need for evidence, no need for motive. The cause is spiritual. The methods are divine. The rules change to fit the moment. You're told not to worry. If you're innocent, God will make that clear. But you've seen what happened to others who trusted in that logic. You watch them being taken from their homes in the night, hands bound in front of them like criminals, despite having done nothing at all. You heard the stories about the ones who confessed just to stop the questions, about the ones who denied everything and were found hanging anyway, about the children crying in their sleep because they can't remember which parts were dreams and which were rehearsals. Your neighbour won't meet your eyes anymore. Her husband seems suddenly reluctant to walk too close when passing. The minister has begun mentioning the devil's work more frequently, and more specifically. Someone is sending spirits into girls. Someone is keeping poppets in secret drawers. Someone has a mark on their body that doesn't feel pain when touched with a needle. You wake in the night and feel your heart beating hard and fast like it's trying to escape your chest. You check the windows, the door. You sit up and press your hand to your mouth, not because you're going to scream, but because you're afraid you might say something out loud that someone could hear. You keep trying to remember everything you've ever done wrong, not big things. Those would be easier to confess. You worry about little things. The time you wished your cousin ill, the time you read the wrong psalm and didn't correct yourself, the time you thought, even for a moment, that God might be cruel. They call it spectral evidence, dreams, visions, feelings. If someone says they saw your ghost choking them in their sleep, that's enough to bring you in. And the worst part is, there's no defense against that. You weren't there, of course, but your spirit might have been. The courts don't ask how that works. They don't need to. They already have an answer. You're a witch. The rest is just logistics. You try to stay quiet, keep your head down, act normal. But what is normal anymore? You speak too little, you're sullen. Too much and you're nervous. You ask to help a neighbour, and they wonder what you want. You don't ask and they say you've grown cold. You see someone cough and your first thought isn't compassion, it's fear. Did they eat your bread? Did they drink from your cup? Is this going to turn into your fault? There's no formal accusation yet, but the air feels like it's tightening. You feel eyes on you that weren't there before. Conversations stop when you walk by. People who once shared stew with you now pull their children closer when you pass. The world hasn't ended. It's just started sliding sideways, slowly and quietly, like a roof beam that's no longer aligned. You wonder if anyone would speak up for you. You make a list in your mind. You cross off most of the names. Eventually someone comes to your door. It's not a mob, not yet. Just two men, plain-faced and polite, with words like inquiry and formality. You're not under arrest, they say. Just needed for questions. Everyone is being asked. It's nothing personal. You bring your shawl. You don't lock the door behind you. You won't be coming back. They take you to the meeting house, or the jail if things are moving faster than usual. Either way, you're placed in a chair, surrounded by faces you've known your whole life, and asked to explain why someone dreamed about you with glowing red eyes. You say you don't know. They write that down. You say you've never harmed anyone. They write that down too. You say you're innocent. And someone begins to convulse on the floor, screaming that your shadow is clawing at their throat. You don't move. You don't breathe. You wait for the moment to end. It doesn't. Another girl joins in. And another. It's a performance, but not one you can critique. It's real because they say it is. because everyone else believes it is, because no one wants to be the one who doesn't believe, because doubt is dangerous, because they're scared, and fear always demands a villain. You're given one final chance. Confess, and perhaps you'll be spared. Deny it, and you'll hang. You open your mouth. You try to speak. But the words don't come easily, because none of the choices are safe. None of them are fair. None of them even resemble justice. You're not being tried for what you've done. You're being tried for what people feel when they look at you, and whether those feelings match the mood of the room. You want to believe this will pass, that someone will come to their senses, that the storm will burn itself out. But you've lived here long enough to know, once someone says the word witch, no one hears anything else. You've been accused, which means you're already guilty. That part doesn't come later, it comes now. The trial is just a formality, an opportunity to publicly confirm what the whispers have already decided. But before any verdict is spoken, there must be signs, proofs of a sort. And so, the search begins. They ask about dreams first. Not yours, theirs. The afflicted girls, the ones twisting and shrieking in fits, describe your spirit visiting them at night. Not your body, mind you, your spectre, an invisible, untethered version of yourself that floats into their homes and strangles them with unseen hands. It's a curious thing, isn't it? That your own soul can betray you. You weren't there, you say. They nod. But your shape was. They saw it. They felt it. They cried out. And now, here you are. It's called spectral evidence, and it's the crown jewel of the courtroom. You don't need a witness to your actions, just a feeling, a vision, a vague sense that someone might have been harmed by your spiritual presence. You can't disprove it. You can't defend yourself against it. You can't even really understand how it works. And yet, there it is, delivered with the wide-eyed conviction of children in crisis and the tearful urgency of people desperate to be believed. The girls fall into fits at exactly the right moment. One of them faints when you walk by. Another claims to see a bird perched on your shoulder, whispering instructions. You can't see it. No one else can either. But the court nods solemnly. A third girl bites her own arm and says, "Your spirit did it. The bruises are real, and therefore, so are the accusations." You glance around the room. No one laughs. No one questions. The judges sit with stony faces, occasionally muttering prayers under their breath, as if the presence of evil is thick enough in the room to taste. You feel it too, the wrongness of it. But you suspect it's coming from a different source than they do. They examine your body, not for wounds or signs of illness, but for marks, a birthmark, a mole, a scar you've had since childhood, anything unusual, anything that might be, with the proper framing, an unnatural blemish. They say witches have witches' teats, hidden spots on the skin that feed their animal familiars. These teats are supposedly insensible to pain, so they bring out a long needle and begin to prick you. When you flinch, they look disappointed. When you don't, they write something down. Either way, they get what they came for. Then come the poppets, small cloth dolls, found buried in gardens or tucked away in cellars, always suspicious, never explained to anyone's satisfaction. You don't own any. That doesn't matter. Someone says they saw one in your house. Someone else says they saw you whispering to it. Suddenly it's being passed around the courtroom, tiny pins jabbed into its chest, and the afflicted girls collapse theatrically again. The doll might as well have your face sewn onto it. Other signs are less tangible. A sudden cold wind in a warm room, a candle that sputters out during prayer, a loaf of bread that won't rise. These are not ordinary misfortunes. They are warnings, evidence. You've seen it yourself, haven't you? How quickly a missing chicken becomes a cursed coop. How easily a bad harvest becomes a mark of spiritual rot. Coincidence isn't welcome here. Coincidence is lazy. Sin has to come from somewhere, and people are tired of blaming themselves. You watch your words now. Every sentence must be carefully measured. Not just what you say, but how you say it. If you sound too defensive, you're hiding something. If you stay too calm, You're not grieving properly. The safest thing to do is cry. But even then, your tears will be judged for their sincerity. People are very good at spotting lies when they've already decided that's what you're telling. The girls speak in tongues sometimes. Their bodies bend at impossible angles. They name names, slowly, dramatically, with pauses that feel rehearsed. It doesn't matter if you've never met them. It doesn't matter if you live 5 miles away and rarely speak. If they say your name, that's enough. You are now part of a network of evil, a spiritual conspiracy stretching across farms, homes, and generations. Even your silence is used against you. The Bible says that the wicked flee when no one pursues. So if you seem nervous, you must have something to hide. If you tremble in the presence of the court, it's fear of divine judgment. If your voice shakes, it's guilt. If you make eye contact for too long, you're trying to charm them. If you don't, you're defiant. Every reaction is preloaded with meaning. You're not speaking to judges, you're speaking to interpreters of your soul. And then there are the confessions, not yours, not yet, but others. Desperate, broken people who finally said yes just to make it stop, who invented names under pressure, who lied because the truth offered no exit. Those names become new accusations. Sometimes they say your name too. You hope it's by accident. You hope they didn't mean it. You hope they didn't even know what they were doing. But it still counts. You hear them speak of covens, secret meetings in the woods, flying through the air on sticks or goats, pacts sealed in blood or strange ointments, kissing the devil's book. They speak these things with trembling voices and darting eyes, and the court believes every word. The more grotesque the detail, the more certain it must be true. Because who would make this up? Who would risk damnation just to tell a story? You begin to understand something terrifying. This is no longer about you. It's about what you represent. You're a vessel now, a symbol of everything wrong with the world, a scapegoat in human form. And as long as you're sitting here, others feel safe, or at least safer than you, and that's enough for them. You're told to pray, loudly, often. You pray for strength, for wisdom, for deliverance, but also, quietly, you pray that someone else is accused tomorrow, that the spotlight shifts, that another name replaces yours. It's a cruel thought, but survival isn't pretty, and it certainly isn't holy. And so you sit surrounded by holy men and frightened girls, while the trial continues without rules, without logic, without mercy. Everything is a sign. Everyone is a witness. And the evidence is everywhere, especially when it isn't. There's no warrant, no dramatic shouting or chase through the woods. You don't wake to find a noose around your neck or a mob with torches outside your door. It's quieter than that. It always is. Your arrest begins the way so many things do in Salem, with a rumour, a glance, a question, said too loudly in the wrong room. And then someone knocks. The constable arrives on foot, flanked by a witness or two who can confirm that yes, you do live here, and yes, this is the right person. He doesn't explain much. He just reads a line or two from a folded paper. Nothing official, just something scribbled by the magistrates. It names you. It says you've been accused, that's all. No explanation, no proof, no specifics. Just a single, haunting phrase. Strong suspicion of witchcraft. You don't resist. That would make things worse. So you take your shawl, step outside, and leave behind your house, your animals, your cooking fire still warm from breakfast. You don't lock the door. You don't get to choose what happens to your things now. People will look. Some will steal. Some will pretend they didn't see anything at all. They don't put you in chains. Not yet. That would imply certainty. And this stage of the process still pretends to be about fairness. Instead, you walk at a steady pace toward the centre of town, watched by neighbours through cracked shutters. Some nod in solemn sympathy. Others look away. A few whisper before they remember that being seen talking about you might be remembered later. The walk is longer than you expect. Your legs feel heavier with every step. Not because of distance, but because this feels like the kind of journey people don't come back from. You try to recall the names of the last few people taken this way. You remember one. You don't remember seeing her again. They take you to the meeting house or a makeshift jail. Anywhere, they have space to hold you until a magistrate is ready to see you. You wait on a bench or a stool, eyes low, trying not to look guilty by looking too nervous. You listen through the walls as someone else answers questions in the next room. Their voice cracks. Yours might too when your turn comes. When you're called in, the room is full of people who already know you're guilty, not because of anything you've done, but because if you weren't, why would someone say otherwise? The logic eats its own tail. You are accused because someone felt afraid. You are imprisoned because someone had a vision. You are guilty because you were noticed. You weren't strange, not really. You were just quiet, or outspoken, or unmarried, or too educated, or too poor, or too lucky. Maybe your bread rose when theirs didn't. Maybe your baby lived when theirs was taken by fever. Maybe someone's cow died and you happened to walk by that morning with an expression that could be mistaken for satisfaction. It doesn't matter what you meant. It only matters how people felt. You weren't arrested for a crime. You were arrested for a mood, for a tone, for existing at the wrong emotional frequency in a room full of anxious people. It wasn't what you did. It was what you gave off. And once that idea takes root, no fact can pull it loose. You are asked again to confess. Not just to witchcraft in general, but to a lifetime of sins you didn't commit. They want a story. Something vivid. Something dramatic. They want detail, even if it's invented. Especially if it's invented, the more surreal, the better. Did you ride a broom? Did you meet the devil in the forest? Did he take the shape of a dog? Or a handsome stranger? Or your dead husband? Don't worry. If you can't think of something, they'll help you remember. Confession is not about truth. It's about narrative, about momentum. The court wants a tale that confirms their fears and entertains their audience. The more you say, the more they nod. The more they nod, the more likely they are to let you live. Though not always, and never without consequences. If you confess, you are spared the gallows, for now. You are not freed, you are not forgiven. You are simply shuffled aside and watched. You may be imprisoned until the trials are done, or until your testimony is no longer useful, but you have marked yourself. You are a witch now, even if it's just on paper. That label will follow you, even if you're lucky enough to survive this. If you refuse to confess, the process continues. You are not commended for your integrity. You are not respected for your honesty. You are instead condemned for your pride, for your obstinance, for your refusal to submit to the truth as others see it. In Salem, dignity is a death sentence. You are returned to your cell, if you can call it that. It's a wooden room, low-ceilinged, filled with the scent of mildew, waste, and old prayers. The straw is damp. The walls sweat in the heat and groan in the cold. There is a bucket, there is no bed. If you're lucky, you'll share the space with a quiet prisoner. If you're not, you'll share it with someone whose sobs never stop. Either way, sleep will not come easily. They don't feed you much. Some bread, a ladle of thin broth, maybe a chunk of old meat if someone remembers. You lose track of time quickly. The light through the slats doesn't give much away. Sunday comes and goes without sermons. No one reads you scripture now. That kind of comfort is reserved for the living and the blameless. You are neither. The constable visits occasionally to pass messages, or just to stare. You try to ask questions. Sometimes he answers. Sometimes he doesn't. You learn to stop expecting clarity. This isn't a system. It's a mood ring with a gavel. You get whatever version of justice the town is feeling that day. You think about the people who might speak up for you. Then you remember they haven't. You think about the last time someone asked how you were. Then you realise they probably weren't really asking. You wonder what you could have done differently. Then you remember nothing. This isn't a punishment for what you did. It's a performance, a theatre of fear. and you've been given the starring role whether you wanted it or not. And so you wait, in a room that wasn't built for comfort, among people who weren't trained for mercy, under laws that weren't written for fairness. Your name will be discussed again soon, probably in a room full of people you once called neighbours. They'll weigh your soul like a sack of flour, poke holes in your past, and decide if your neck deserves rope. And you won't get to speak for yourself. Not really. The jail isn't what you pictured, if you ever dared to picture it at all. It's not a stone fortress or a looming dungeon. There are no bars polished by generations of desperate hands. No iron doors groaning with menace. It's simpler, rougher. A room, really, maybe part of a barn, or a cellar. The walls are made of warped timber that lean slightly inward, as if even the building itself has grown weary of holding in the accused. You don't get your own space. There's no privacy, no division, no attempt at human comfort. You are herded together with others. Women who were once your neighbours, your midwives, your acquaintances in the pew behind you. They sit in corners or crouch along the floor, wrapped in whatever scraps of fabric they were allowed to bring. Some whisper prayers. Others hum tunelessly, as if trying to keep their minds from slipping sideways. The smell is the first thing you notice. It's thick, sour, and constant. Sweat, rot, human waste. There's no proper latrine, just a bucket in the corner that overflows more often than it's emptied. The air doesn't move. Light comes through one small window, high up on the wall, its glass warped and smudged with months of grime. When the wind howls outside, it creeps in through the cracks, bringing with it a sharp cold that settles into your bones and stays there. You're given shackles, not heavy ones, not yet, but enough to pinch your ankles if you move too quickly. The metal is rusted and cold, and it clinks when you shift. It reminds everyone you're not a guest. You're property now, one step above livestock, 2 steps below mercy. You weren't violent, you didn't run, but the chains are a statement, not to you, to them. A reassurance that order is being kept, that the devil is being managed, one link at a time. There are rats, of course there are. You hear them at night, skittering across the beams, slipping into the straw, brushing against the edge of your skirt. You try not to react. Movement draws attention, and in here, attention is the last thing you want. You share the space with women who mutter to themselves, who twitch, who scream in the night, as if chased by something only they can see. Maybe they are. Maybe you're next. You're not allowed visitors unless someone asks permission. Most don't. If they do come, they stand across the room. They don't step forward. They ask how you are, and you lie. You say you're strong. You say you're praying. You say God has a plan. Then they leave, relieved to be on the right side of the door, pretending the stench won't follow them home. You're fed, technically, a heel of bread, a scoop of something that was probably stew 2 days ago. It's cold by the time it reaches you, ladled into a wooden bowl that smells of mould and desperation. You eat quickly, but without joy. Food isn't pleasure anymore. It's survival. And even then, it feels like a test. If you eat too eagerly, you're accused of gluttony. If you refuse, you're rejecting God's provision. You learn to chew slowly and make no sound. The guards say little. They aren't cruel, but they aren't kind. They're tired. You can see it in their faces, the fatigue of men who have seen too much and understood too little. They don't want to be here any more than you do, but unlike you, they get to go home at night, scrape the filth from their boots, and sit at a table where no one accuses them of consorting with demons. There is no routine, no schedule. Time moves in odd, slow circles. Morning blurs into afternoon, afternoon into a dusk that seeps in early and stays late. The Sabbath passes in silence, marked only by fewer footsteps outside. The days between are indistinguishable. You try to mark them with scratches on the wall, but lose count after a week. Or maybe 2. No one corrects you. No one knows for sure. When the magistrates summon you, It happens without warning. Someone opens the door, shouts your name. You're allowed to straighten your clothes, smooth your hair if it hasn't been cut already. Then you're led out, not escorted, led, like an animal, like something fragile or dangerous or both. You try not to limp as the iron digs into your ankles. The town looks different from the outside. Brighter, colder, harsher. You forget that the world kept turning while you sat in the dark. Children play in the street. Chickens dart between yards. Someone is boiling something that smells, impossibly, like bread. For a moment, you resent them. For living, for laughing, for believing they are safe. In the meeting house, you're made to stand, or sit, or kneel. It doesn't matter. The posture changes, but the outcome doesn't. The accusations are read aloud. You hear your name followed by words like torment, spectre, and unholy congress. You wonder how many of the listeners believe it. You wonder how many need to. You're not allowed counsel. No one stands beside you. You speak for yourself, which is another way of saying you speak to no one. The questions are framed as traps. They aren't meant to be answered. They're meant to be endured. You're told your denial is proof. You're asked why the afflicted girls cry when you look at them. You are told to confess. You do not. You return to your cell with shoulders that feel heavier than your chains. Someone asks you what they said. You don't answer. The words sit like stones in your chest. You lie down on damp straw that smells faintly of mildew and urine. You curl your arms around yourself and wait for something to change. It doesn't. At night, you dream of warmth, not comfort, just warmth. A blanket, a fire, a place to sit that isn't crawling. You wake to darkness and the sound of someone coughing blood into their sleeve. You close your eyes again and try to remember a time before this. A time when you were still just a person and not a symbol. A time when fear didn't have your name on it. And then the door creaks open again. Someone new is brought in. You watch as she's led to the corner, shackled, left. She looks around the room like she's trying to understand what this place is. You know, you learned quickly, and she will too. It's not called a trial right away. They use words like examination or hearing, but the meaning is the same. They ask questions, you give answers, they frown, you sweat, and by the end of it, you're closer to the gallows than when you started. There's no jury, no defence, no one to speak on your behalf, unless someone volunteers, which most people don't. Saying the wrong thing could put their name on the list next, so they stay silent. For their own safety, for their children, for the greater good, or so they'll say later when asked why they let you stand alone. The magistrates sit behind a plain wooden table, their faces sharp and serious. Some of them you've known for years. One of them once bought a side of beef from your father. Another used to visit your neighbour to buy butter. Now they speak in tones meant to carry weight. Their robes are clean. Their hands do not shake. They say they are here in the name of justice. But you've seen justice, and this is not it. This is theatre with a body count. They begin with the usual questions. Do you believe in God? Have you made a covenant with the devil? Do you repent? The questions are blunt, stacked like firewood, and no answer is good enough. If you say no, you're lying. If you say yes, you've confessed. If you hesitate, they repeat the question louder, as if clarity is your only sin. Their voices rise with each round, and your own grows smaller, thinner, swallowed up by the space between you. The afflicted girls are brought in again. They arrive in clusters, pale and trembling, already mid-fit before you so much as breathe. One of them falls to the floor, screaming that your spirit has entered her. Another clutches her throat and says she can't breathe when you look at her. A third convulses so violently she knocks over a stool. None of them touch you. None of them need to. Your presence is the proof. They ask you about your dreams. They ask if you've flown, if you've attended meetings in the forest, if you've seen black dogs or cats or birds that speak in human voices. You say no. They ask again. You say no again. They raise their eyebrows and write something down. Her refusing to confess is prideful, they say. It shows stubbornness. And stubbornness, as they've explained, is a form of rebellion, which conveniently is the devil's favourite sin. Then they ask about the others. They want names. Anyone who's tempted you, anyone you've seen in a dream, anyone who seemed odd, distant, a little too quiet at a prayer meeting. It doesn't matter if it's true. What matters is that it's useful. Every name adds to their net. And if you give them one, they might let you go. Not home, not free, but out of the courtroom, back to your cell, your head still attached to your shoulders. For now, you think about it. Of course you do. You think about that woman 2 houses down, the one who scolded you in the marketplace, the one who looked at you strangely during the last Sabbath. You think about how easy it would be to say her name, to push the spotlight a few feet to the left, but something in you won't move, or maybe it's already broken. Either way, you stay quiet, for now. The crowd watches, but they do not speak. They nod occasionally. They murmur at the right moments. They look at you with the same expression people wear at funerals. Something between sympathy and relief. They're not here to help you. They're here to make sure they're still safe. Watching your trial is like looking into a mirror and seeing their own worst fears reflected. And as long as you're the one chained to the floor, they get to pretend they're righteous. You're told to recite the Lord's Prayer. This is considered an excellent test of innocence. Witches allegedly can't do it. So you begin. The words are familiar. You've known them since childhood. But your voice shakes. You stumble. Not because you don't believe, but because your mouth is dry and your hands are shaking and the girls are screaming and someone keeps whispering your name, like it's already carved on a headstone. You finish the prayer somehow. They don't congratulate you. They say nothing. One of the judges coughs and writes something in a ledger. The moment passes. You're still guilty. The test was more for show than anything else. Just another box to check on the way to your sentencing. Sometimes the trial ends in one day. Sometimes it takes 2. You're given no warning, no closing statement, no moment to plead. The court adjourns with a prayer, as if that somehow sanctifies the damage. And then you're taken away again. Back to the cold, back to the dark, back to your corner of straw and silence. You wait, because that's all you can do. For a sentence, for the next accusation, for someone else to take your place. Every footstep in the hallway is a storm in your chest. Every creak of the door might be the one that leads you to the gallows, or to the woods, or to a mercy that never comes. Outside the courtroom, your name spreads like smoke. People repeat the accusations with wide eyes and solemn nods, adding details that weren't said aloud. They say they always suspected something, that you were too quiet, that your eyes were too sharp, that your cow gave too much milk for someone so modest. In a village this small, reputations rot quickly. If you are lucky, if such a word still has any meaning, someone might petition for your release. It's rare and risky, and not often successful, but it happens. Not for the innocent, necessarily, but for the well-connected, or the well-married, or the well-remembered. You try to think of anyone who might do that for you. You come up empty. And so the trial ends, not with justice, not with clarity, but with a thin line drawn between one kind of suffering and another. You are no longer awaiting judgment. You are simply awaiting execution. In Salem, innocence is a technicality. Survival is a fluke. And justice is just another word for timing. The choice comes after the trial, not officially, of course. No one leans in and says it aloud, but it's there carved into the silence, hanging in the air like smoke from a fire no one wants to admit they lit. Confess and live. Deny and hang. It's not complicated, but it is cruel. They bring you back to your cell and give you time to think. Not rest, not prepare, just think. That's what they call it when they leave you alone with your fear and the sound of chains shifting in the dark. You've heard the pattern by now. You've seen the ones who confessed. They survive, at least on paper. They're not pardoned, they're not forgiven, they're not even believed, but they're not dead. And in Salem, that passes for mercy. The offer is unspoken but unmistakable. You just have to admit you were a witch, that you made a pact, that you hurt people with invisible forces and consorted with the devil in the woods. No one expects you to make it convincing. They've already decided it's true. You just need to sign your name to their version of the story. Give them what they want, and they'll call it justice. You lie awake staring at the ceiling, trying to imagine what kind of person walks out of this. The answer isn't clear. Some who confessed were released after months. Some stayed in jail long after the trials ended. Some lost their homes, their families, their minds. There's no neat return to normal. The stain doesn't wash out. It just becomes part of your name. And then there are those who said no, who kept saying no, who went to the gallows without apology. They're spoken of quietly, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with confusion. People say they held firm or chose truth, but no one volunteers to follow their example. You remember their names because the court remembers them too. They're still dead. You wonder if dying clean is better than living dirty. You wonder if God prefers martyrs to liars. But mostly, you wonder what kind of death waits for you if you don't speak the words they want. Because they won't burn you. Not here, not now. That's a European indulgence. Massachusetts favours the rope. Quieter, cheaper, public enough to scare the rest. No one tells you the date. You find out the same way everyone does, by the sound of footsteps and the change in the guard's expression. They don't speak. They don't need to. They just unlock the door and gesture with a hand that doesn't quite meet your eyes. You rise without help. You don't fight. Fighting would only confirm what they believe. They don't dress you in black. They don't let you change at all. You go in what you've been wearing, the same threadbare gown, the same stockings with holes in the heels, the same shawl that smells of mildew and old tears. You walk through the streets with the others, feet scuffing the dirt, wrists tied loosely, because the spectacle doesn't require a struggle. It requires a message. The town gathers. They always do. No one forces them. They just come. Children on shoulders, hands shading eyes, mouths tight with something between fear and curiosity. Some people cry, some whisper, some stand very still, as if trying to will themselves invisible. You know the feeling. The gallows are nothing special. A frame of timber, a step, a beam. The rope dangles casually, like it isn't waiting for a throat. The executioner is a man who used to mend shoes. He looks tired. Not guilty, just tired. The ministers are already there, waiting with scripture in hand, ready to speak of repentance and salvation and the eternal justice of God. They ask again, one last time. The offer is still open. Confess now and the noose comes off. You will not be free, but you will be alive. You could be returned to jail or held under house arrest, or simply left to rot in someone else's barn. But your body will keep moving. That's something. You look at the crowd. You look at the sky. You think about the names they forced from other mouths. You think about the neighbour who stopped visiting, the friend who never wrote, the family who said they believed you, but not loudly enough to matter. You think about the devil and how ridiculous it is that anyone ever believed he had time to attend secret meetings with tired farmers and overworked midwives. You say nothing. Or maybe you speak. Maybe you say you're innocent, calmly and clearly, knowing it will make no difference. Maybe you say you forgive them. Maybe you stay silent. It doesn't matter. The outcome is already stitched together, like the hem of a funeral shroud. The rope waits. They place the noose around your neck like it's a necklace. Not roughly, not kindly, just matter of fact. You step forward when told. You breathe in the sharp scent of wood and dust, and the faint tang of iron in the air. The crowd holds its breath, not out of grief, out of etiquette. You don't fall far. The drop is short, designed less for efficiency and more for endurance. The body kicks, the rope creaks. The crowd watches, no one cheers. That would be in poor taste. This is a religious act after all. Later, they will speak your name again. In sermons, in stories, in court records. They will say you were convicted of witchcraft, that you died unrepentant, that your soul is in God's hands now. They will not say the evidence was imaginary, or that fear makes fools of everyone. They will not say that what happened was wrong, because that's not what trials are for. They are not for finding truth, they are for making order. And in Salem, order is worth more than innocence. The hill isn't much to look at. Not high, not wide, just a rise in the land north of the village, where the trees thin out and the grass grows tall and stringy. You wouldn't have thought of it before. It was just a hill, too rocky for planting, too far from water, too exposed to be useful. Now it has a name, Gallows Hill, or sometimes, more quietly, the Hangman's Hill. It doesn't have a fence, no gate, no markers, just the wooden frame standing alone near the crest, square and plain, the beam darkened by weather and what came before. It's not much of a structure. It doesn't need to be. People do the rest. The executions are public, but not festive. No music, no vendors, no cries of justice, just townsfolk gathered in quiet clumps, faces stiff, hands folded, eyes darting. No one ever knows quite how to stand or what to say. Some look away, some stare too long. Everyone leaves feeling worse, which is perhaps the point. They bring you here in a cart. Not because it's far, it isn't, but because the walk would take too long. Too much time for people to change their minds. Too much chance that the condemned might try something foolish, like running or praying too loudly. So they load you in like wood for the fire, surrounded by men with flat eyes and sharper weapons. The journey is short and silent, except for the creaking of the wheels and the occasional cough from the man beside you. As you approach the hill, the crowd parts, not out of respect, out of habit, out of fear that they might brush against you and carry home whatever it is that made you this way. Witchcraft doesn't smudge like dirt. It spreads like sickness. People stand just far enough back to feel safe, and just close enough to say they were there. You can see the rope before you reach the top. It sways in the wind, lazy and unbothered. The noose has been used before. You don't know how many times. You don't want to. It looks worn, familiar, like something that belongs here. There's no ceremony, no priest anointing your head, no final meal, just a minister mumbling scripture you already know by heart and a man checking the knot like it's a pair of shoelaces. The executioner doesn't speak. He's not paid to speak. He's paid to make sure the drop is quick and the body doesn't twitch too long. He doesn't always succeed. The other prisoners watch from the cart. You glance at them briefly, see their pale faces and clenched jaws, and recognise the same thought in each of them. Am I next? You don't answer. You don't speak. There's nothing left to say. You're offered one last chance, again. Always one last chance. Confess now, and maybe you'll live. Not forever, just a little longer. Maybe in a different cell. Maybe in chains somewhere else. Maybe until someone forgets you, or remembers you inconveniently. But at least you won't be hanging. Not today. You shake your head. Or you stay silent. Or you say the words again. I am innocent. The crowd rustles, not because they believe you, but because they've heard it before. Everyone says it, until they don't. The platform creaks beneath your feet. The wood smells of sweat and rain and something faintly coppery. You think about the others who stood here, about how they held themselves, about what they saw in their final moments. You wonder if it was the sky, or the crowd, or nothing at all. They bind your hands. Not tightly, not cruelly, just enough to make sure you don't try to hold on to anything when the floor disappears. You look at the minister. His eyes are closed. His prayer is for your soul, not your comfort. You think of your family, of what they'll say tomorrow, of how long it will take before your name becomes something they speak only in whispers. There's no drum beat, no countdown, just a hand signal, a step back, a lever. The ground drops away, and for a second, just a second, the world holds its breath. The rope catches, your body jerks, the silence deepens. No one moves. The crowd waits longer than they need to. Not out of cruelty, out of etiquette. Leaving too soon looks disrespectful, but no one wants to linger either, so they shuffle away in pairs and small groups, murmuring words that no one will remember. The children are herded home. The older ones stay a few moments longer, glancing over their shoulders like they expect the devil himself to rise from the dirt and explain everything. Your body is left hanging, not for long, just long enough. The law doesn't demand it, but tradition does. A warning, they say, a symbol. Proof that evil can be rooted out and punished, that righteousness has been restored, that God, at last, is watching favourably again. Eventually, you are cut down, not gently, not cruelly, just efficiently. Your body is wrapped in cloth and carried away. There will be no gravestone, no prayers, no consecrated ground. You are buried in an unmarked pit near the edge of the woods. Your name will not be carved in stone. It will be scratched into a page of court records and filed among others like it, lost in lists, numbers, and fading ink. You're not the first, you won't be the last. There are more trials coming, more accusations, more names. The fear hasn't passed, it's only learned to move faster. What matters is that the people feel cleansed, for now, that they can return to their homes, to their prayers, to their fields, and tell themselves they did what needed to be done. No one will remember your eyes, or your voice, or the way your hands trembled when they tied the rope. They will remember you as a witch, or as a warning, or not at all. The hill will stand, quiet, unchanged. Grass will grow, the timber will rot. The wind will carry away the scent of judgment, and someday people will walk here without knowing what happened under their feet. But today it remembers you. Death isn't the end, not for your name, not for your body, certainly not for the story they're telling about you. Once the rope has done its work and the crowd has turned homeward, you become something else entirely. Not a person, not even a warning. You become evidence, the final punctuation mark on a sentence no one asks to read. Your body isn't laid out in a coffin. There is no procession, no mourners in black, no flowers, no minister's voice speaking solemn comfort to the living. You don't get those things, not when you've been convicted of witchcraft. Burials are for Christians. You, supposedly, are something else now. You don't deserve a proper grave. You get a hole in the ground and silence. They don't even always tell your family where the body is placed. Sometimes they bury it near the gallows. Sometimes in shallow pits behind the jail. Sometimes they don't bury it at all, at least not right away. It depends on the mood, on the weather, on how many more they expect to execute in the coming days. You're not a person anymore. You're logistics. Your relatives might try to claim your body. Some do, quietly, after dark. They dig you up by lamplight and lay you to rest in secret, far from consecrated ground. No headstone, just a patch of disturbed earth under a tree. A place to visit maybe, but only at night. Only when no one is watching. Because they're not just grieving you, they're surviving you. Being related to a witch isn't a good look. Even after your death, the association clings like smoke. Your husband, if you had one, might remarry quickly. Not for love, but for reputation. Your children, if they're still in the village, walk with their heads down now. They speak less. They look older. You don't get to be remembered as a mother. You get remembered as a scandal. If your family speaks your name, they do it behind closed doors, quietly, like a prayer or a wound. And if they don't, if they pretend you never existed, that's a kind of survival too. In Salem, forgetting someone can be a protective act, a kindness, a strategy. Meanwhile, the court records carry on without you. Your name is written down, crossed out, annotated. Your property is inventoried, item by item. It's amazing how fast your belongings become state concern. They list your spoons, your linens, your sheep, your pots. They make note of debts owed, favours remembered, land disputed. You are not survived. You are processed. Your house may be seized, sold, burned, or left to rot. It depends on who benefits. Salem has many ways of redistributing sin, and none of them are subtle. What matters is that what was yours becomes someone else's. Your home, your goods, your place in the community. Someone else steps into the space you left behind, like it was never yours at all. But you remain useful, in a way. Your death justifies the rest. It affirms the system. It tells the village, yes, the witches are real. Look how righteously we dealt with them. You become a kind of proof, a fixed point in their moral compass. Your absence is used to comfort those still trembling with fear. They say the devil is weaker now. They say the afflicted girls are calming. They say the village feels safer. It isn't true, not really. The fear doesn't end, it shifts. It settles into new shapes, new names, new glances. The question is never, was she innocent? The question is always, who's next? Your trial is referenced for months, pieces of it quoted, repeated, misremembered. Someone says you shouted a curse. You didn't. Someone says you floated before they arrested you. You didn't. Someone else swears they saw you smile at the noose. Proof, they say, that you are beyond redemption. No one contradicts them. The truth, as always, has no defenders. After a while, your name fades, not erased, just softened, like a stain on cloth that no one managed to scrub out, but eventually learned to ignore. Your execution becomes a date on a calendar, a page in a sermon, a lesson to be taught, though never in your favour. Children grow up hearing about what you did, not who you were. They learn the story without the humanity. Years pass, the panic cools, the trials end. Some people apologise, quietly, carefully, not in court and never in writing, just in private conversations, shared with the right kind of sorrow, the socially acceptable kind, full of regret but not responsibility. They say, it was a strange time. They say, we didn't know better. They say, it wasn't me. Decades later, the court reverses some of the convictions. Not all, not yours at first, just a few. The most famous, the most politically inconvenient. They call it reconciliation. They say it's healing. They pass laws that clear your name. Long after your children are dead, your grave is forgotten, and your story has been rewritten by people who never heard your voice. In time, your name might appear on a monument, carved in stone along with others. It will say innocent. It will say victim. It will say never again. People will walk past it. Some will pause. Some will read. Some will feel something. But most won't know what really happened to you. They won't know the chill in the cell, the sound of the rope, the silence that followed. They won't know that you were afraid or brave or both. You become a symbol, a lesson, a warning, a name printed on a plaque that tourists visit in the fall, when the leaves are red and the air smells like cinnamon. They'll buy cider, they'll wear hats, they'll light candles, they'll call it history. You'll still be gone, and nothing about it will feel like justice. You may be dead, but the world doesn't end with you. It keeps turning, creaking forward like a cart with a warped axle. Ere the sun still rises over Salem, the cows still need milking, the fire still has to be fed. The village doesn't pause for grief, it barely slows down. Life here is a duty, and death, even yours, is just another burden to carry. Your family, if you had one, walks with their heads lower now, not always out of shame, sometimes out of strategy. It's easier not to be noticed, easier not to draw attention. Grief is dangerous when people are still looking for witches. Too many tears and you seem unstable, not enough and you seem unbothered. There's a narrow space between suspicion and survival, and they're trying to live in it. Your children, if they're old enough to understand, learn quickly not to ask questions. The other children already know. They whisper things. They repeat what their parents say behind closed doors. The words witch's daughter or cursed blood carry weight. School lessons hit harder when your mother was on the scaffold. History becomes personal. and dangerous. Your husband, if he still claims you, might speak up once, briefly, to say you were good, that you were godly, that you were misunderstood. Then he'll stop. It's not safe to mourn someone publicly when the village decided they were unholy. There's only so far love will go when a rope is involved. The safest thing he can do now is remarry and stop mentioning your name. Your house, once filled with ordinary noise, now holds silence. And silence doesn't stay silent for long. It gathers dust. It collects judgment. Someone will ask if they can buy it. Someone else will say they'd rather it was torn down. No one wants to live in a witch's home, but everyone wants to be sure no one else does either. Your friends, if they're still speaking, walk a careful line. Some might still believe in your innocence. Fewer will say so out loud. Most won't mention you at all. They'll say it was a tragedy, a misunderstanding, a necessary evil in a time of fear. That's how people process guilt, by pretending they weren't part of it, or by calling it something noble, something inevitable, something distant. And yet the others still imprisoned remember you differently. They remember the sound of your voice in the dark, the way you whispered prayers, the way you helped divide the crust of bread when no one was looking. They remember how you refused to cry in front of the magistrates, how you looked at the crowd, how your name was spoken at night with equal parts fear and awe. Some will curse you, quietly, in moments of weakness, for not confessing, for dying when they were still trying to live, for being braver than they are, or more foolish. It's hard to say which. They count the names scratched on the wall and wonder when theirs will be added, and whether anyone will remember the real person behind it. The jail is colder now. Your absence leaves a kind of draught, a hollowness in the room that no one talks about. New prisoners arrive. Some weep, some rage, some go very quiet very quickly. The old ones just watch. They've learned that fear ages the face faster than time ever could. There's a look you get after too long in the dark, a look your friends now wear. The afflicted girls continue their performances. Their fits become sharper, more elaborate. The names they offer come faster, like a wheel picking up speed. Your name is no longer useful. It's already been cashed in pay, but someone else's might be. The court still listens, still writes things down, still nods. No one wants to be the first to say enough. The ministers continue to preach. They speak of righteousness, of triumph, of purification. They do not mention your name directly anymore, but they mention your kind. The dangerous women, the discontent, the unholy, the ones who questioned or stayed silent or didn't weep quite enough at the right time. The devil wears many masks, they say, and no one wants to be fooled again. Outside, the seasons shift. Autumn gives way to a bitter early winter. The fields lie fallow. The trees go bare. People begin to speak more softly again. The number of new accusations slows, then stops. Not because the fear is gone, but because the village is exhausted. The jails are full. The gallows have been used too often. Even cruelty eventually wears people out. Some of the survivors will be released, not quickly, not cleanly. They'll be sent home with fewer teeth and more nightmares. Their families will receive them like broken tools, still technically useful, but no longer trusted. They will never be called innocent. They will simply stop being called anything at all. Others won't come back. They'll die in jail, not by rope, by cold or hunger or grief that chewed its way into the lungs and never left. There will be no funerals for them either. Just another body, wrapped in a cloth buried in dirt that won't remember the name. And the ones who never spoke up, who watched you hang and said nothing, they will live long, quiet lives. Some will change towns, some will stay and grow old. They will raise children who ask what happened during those years. And they'll answer the way people do when they want to forget. It was a strange time. Things got out of hand. People were afraid. No one will say, "We killed our neighbours to feel safe." No one will say, We listened to children and silenced women and burned reason to keep order. They'll say it was the devil. They'll say we were misled. And they will believe it, because believing anything else would mean admitting what really happened. And the truth, as always, is heavier than most people are willing to carry. Regret doesn't arrive in Salem like a thunderclap. It doesn't burst through the doors of the meeting house and shout for justice. It comes like everything else here, slow, uneven, and dressed in respectable clothes. It starts with discomfort, with muttered questions behind closed doors, with sermons that grow less fiery, with people wondering quietly whether they went too far. The executions stop in 1693, not because the courts find their conscience, but because they find resistance. The governor's own wife is accused. That changes things. It always does. Sympathy isn't sparked by injustice. It's sparked by proximity. When the blade gets too close to the people in power, the definition of witchcraft starts to shift. The court is dissolved. A new one is formed. One that looks back at the pile of convictions and says, carefully, that maybe some mistakes were made. They don't say which mistakes or who made them. They just stop killing people. And that feels to many like progress. Some prisoners are released, quietly, without apology. They walk out of their cells like shadows, blinking into daylight that doesn't feel quite real. They go home, if they still have homes. If someone hasn't claimed the land, if someone hasn't moved into their bed, if their neighbours will still speak to them, if they're still strong enough to walk that far, they aren't welcomed back with open arms. There are no feasts, no celebrations. They are not martyrs. They are not heroes. They are tolerated, watched, spoken of in half whispers. Some won't live long after their release. The damage has already been done. To their bodies, their minds, their reputations, they become background figures in the village again, just slightly out of focus. The judges who oversaw the trials don't stand trial themselves. They write letters. Some of them pray. Some issue public fasts, long days of prayer and repentance, meant to wash the blood off their hands, without requiring any direct responsibility. They say they were misled, that the devil deceived them, that the afflicted girls were convincing. They ask God for forgiveness, not the families. It's cleaner that way. Samuel Sewell, one of the judges, will stand up in church in 1697 and confess that he was wrong. He will weep. He will kneel. He will fast every year for the rest of his life. People will call it brave. They will not call it too late. Others are less apologetic. They say they acted on the information they had, that it was God's will, that they were simply keeping order, that you can't blame people for being scared. That history will understand. History usually does. It has a short memory and an even shorter attention span. The girls, the ones who cried and screamed and pointed, they grow up. Some of them leave Salem, some stay. Most refuse to talk about what happened. A few apologise, but only much later, when their own lives are safe and their reputations are more valuable than their silence. Anne Putnam, one of the loudest accusers, will stand in front of a congregation in 1706 and say, she was deceived by Satan. She won't mention your name directly, but she'll ask for forgiveness, not from you, from God. Your family, if they're still there, might see small reparations, not enough to undo anything. Just a few coins, a line in a ledger. In 1711, the Massachusetts General Court will formally clear the names of some who were convicted and executed, not all. Not at first, only those with families who had the time and influence to petition. It's not justice, it's paperwork. Eventually, they'll add your name too, quietly, as part of a group. They won't hold a service, they won't mark your grave, but they'll put your name on the list of people who shouldn't have died. That will have to be enough. Years pass. The story of Salem becomes something people tell, with lowered voices, something they point to as a mistake, a moment, a dark chapter. But they still don't talk about the machinery, about how quickly fear turns into righteousness, about how confession becomes currency, about how ordinary people built the scaffold and then went home to supper. The trees regrow on the hill. The gallows rot. Eventually, no one remembers exactly where the bodies were buried. People guess. They plant gardens, build houses. The land swallows the story like it swallows everything else, slowly and without ceremony. By the 19th century, Salem's reputation is no longer dangerous. It's profitable. Witchcraft becomes entertainment. Tourists come. Stories are rewritten. The horror is drained of its weight and turned into folklore. Girls in black dresses, wooden signs, shops that sell broomsticks and candles. History becomes something people wear on hats. In 1957, more than 2.5 centuries after your death, the state finally admits, in writing, that what happened was wrong. In 2001, they add a few final names to the list of the wrongly accused. It is the sort of gesture that looks good in schoolbooks. It does nothing for you. People walk through Salem now holding paper maps and pumpkin lattes. They visit the memorial. They take photos. They pose beside your name, etched into stone, with a respectful frown. Then they move on to the next stop, the gift shop, the coffee place, a museum with wax figures that twitch on command. And you? You're still gone, still buried somewhere unmarked, still part of a story most people only halfway believe. A lesson that's told with more irony than sorrow, something to whisper about in October. Regret came, eventually, but not with mercy, not with justice, just with time. And time, as it turns out, is a poor healer. It blurs the edges, softens the names, turns rope into metaphor, and suffering into spectacle. It gives people distance, and with distance comes comfort. But not for you. You didn't deserve this. Not because you were perfect, not because you were sinless, not because you were more pious or patient or prayerful than your neighbours. You didn't deserve this because no one did. Because guilt should not be assumed based on fear. Because pain should not be used as proof. Because being quiet, or different, or unlucky should never be enough to end a life. You were just a person, a tired, flawed, ordinary person living in an unforgiving time. You got up early, you worked hard, you prayed, you obeyed, you tried, even when no one noticed. You had bad days, you snapped at people, you skipped the occasional church meeting. You rolled your eyes when someone repeated the same old sermon for the 3rd week in a row. But none of that made you dangerous. It just made you human. They said you were a witch, but what they meant was that you were inconvenient. You didn't fit neatly into the box they'd drawn for you. Maybe you didn't marry. Or maybe you did, and still didn't stay quiet. Maybe you lived alone, or lived too loudly. Maybe your hands were good with herbs, or your tongue too sharp. Maybe your garden grew when others failed. Maybe you healed someone when the doctor could not. You were noticed. That was your first mistake. You weren't targeted for casting spells. You were targeted because people needed a reason, a scapegoat, something to point to when the world didn't make sense, when crops died, when children got sick, when animals were born wrong, when their guilt bubbled up in the night and needed a face to attach itself to. You were accused because something had to break, and you were already standing near the fault line. They said your name in court and everything changed. Suddenly every cough you caused, every argument you'd had, every time someone saw you walking alone, all of it became evidence. A story formed around you that had nothing to do with you, a version of you that lived in other people's fear, one you had no control over, a shadow stitched together from superstition and regret. You weren't the only one. There were others, too many to count, some older, some younger, some who confessed just to stop the shouting, some who held on until the rope broke their silence for them. All of them caught in the same current, none of them given the chance to be fully real in the eyes of the law, or their neighbours, or history. They didn't listen when you spoke, they heard what they wanted, twisted your words into warnings, turned your silence into confirmation. They said if you were truly innocent, you'd cry harder, or speak softer, or pray louder. They gave you rules that contradicted themselves, and then condemned you for failing to follow them. The truth is you were powerless from the moment someone looked at you too long and thought, "She makes me uneasy." You could have been anyone. That's what makes it terrifying. You didn't need to be guilty, just unlucky, just the wrong person in the wrong season of fear, the wrong shape in a crowd of frightened people desperate to find the source of their suffering. They told themselves they were saving the village, that by accusing you, they were protecting their children, their souls, their fragile sense of order, and maybe some of them even believed that. Maybe that's the most frightening part, that they could kill you and still sleep at night, convinced they were doing the Lord's work. You didn't get to explain, not really. You answered questions that weren't questions. You were examined, not heard, judged before you were even brought into the room, tried for things that happened in dreams, in visions, in stories passed from one mouth to another until they became something solid enough to hammer nails through. And after it was over, after the rope, or the cell, or the fever, no one stood up and said, "This should not have happened." Not until much later, when the smoke had cleared and the fear had lost its grip. They said they were sorry, but not to you. They said your name again, but not with warmth, just in lists, in ledgers, in legislation designed to tidy up the past. But your life wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a line in a file or a statistic carved into a plaque. You had thoughts no one ever heard, memories no one recorded, people you loved, things you hoped for, regrets, laughs, private jokes, nights when you stood at the edge of the woods and wondered if there was more to the world than this patch of dirt and fear. You were real, and you were taken from it. You weren't perfect, you weren't a saint, but you were not what they said you were. You didn't hex livestock. You didn't consort with Satan. You didn't curse children or fly through the night or poison wells. You didn't ask to be remembered like this, as a warning, as a cautionary tale, as a ghost. You asked, if anything, for nothing more than to be left alone, to live quietly, to work, to think your thoughts in peace. But Salem didn't allow that. It didn't make room for people who lived on the edges. It didn't tolerate quiet defiance or loud honesty or anything in between. And so they took everything, your body, your name, your place in the world, and they justified it with the language of righteousness. But none of it was righteous, and none of it was deserved. They say we learned from it. That's the line now, the phrase handed down through textbooks and tour guides and carefully scripted speeches. Salem was a tragedy, they say, a moment of mass hysteria, of religious extremism, of collective failure. But we learned, we moved on, we became better. It sounds good, it always does when pain is far enough in the past that people can shape it like clay. They recite it like a charm against repeating history, as if simply acknowledging that it happened is the same as making sure it won't happen again. They tell the story now with softened edges. The scaffolding is still there, but the nails have been polished. They say it was fear, that people were ignorant, that they didn't know any better, as though fear makes cruelty more acceptable, as though ignorance makes injustice somehow neutral. They don't say it was convenience, or power, or profit, or a convenient excuse to silence people who are inconvenient in the wrong ways. That part tends to be left out. The lessons are easy when you're not the one in the stocks, when you're not the one being examined for invisible sins, when your name isn't the one written in a ledger with a quiet flourish beside the word executed. They talk about how we've progressed, how modern justice is better, how the courts are fair now, how people don't get punished for things they can't prove. They don't mention that people still get arrested for looking the wrong way, still lose jobs for having the wrong name, still disappear behind doors where no one asks what happened afterward. Witch hunts didn't end. They just changed vocabulary. The trials grew quieter. The stakes became more subtle. Instead of ropes, they use rumours. Instead of dungeons, there are inboxes and empty offices, and reputations that vanish overnight. The gallows are digital now, and the crowd is larger. But we call that progress too. In schoolrooms, Salem is a cautionary tale, something to fill a chapter in an American history book, a symbol of what happens when logic is abandoned, when superstition rules. They teach it like a fable, as if the problem was belief in witches and not the deeper truth that people will believe anything if it helps them feel safe or powerful or right. They say it was about God, about the devil, about the battle between good and evil. But that's not what it felt like from inside the cell. It felt like a group of frightened people making decisions too fast and too loudly, trying to drown out the sound of their own doubt. It felt like a community collapsing in on itself, one name at a time. The lesson, if there was one, is not that people are too quick to judge. It's that they will do anything, to keep from being the next one accused. That's what fuels it. Not hatred, not even belief, just fear and self-preservation, wrapped in a prayer and tied with a noose. They built statues eventually. Plaques, memorials carved in granite, lined with names. Yours might be there, or it might not. Even in death, recognition is uneven. Sometimes it depends on whether someone pushed hard enough, whether there was a surviving relative, whether your story was convenient enough to include. The tourists come anyway. They kneel to take pictures. They light candles. They press their hands to your name and say they're sorry, though not to you. Not really. They say it like it's a tradition, like it's part of the experience. They buy t-shirts afterward, something with a witch hat or a black cat, a souvenir to commemorate the idea of what happened here. The air feels different now, less charged, less dangerous, but not because the world changed, just because the centre of the storm moved somewhere else. People still love a good accusation, still love a villain, still love a simple story where someone is clearly wrong, and someone else gets to feel righteous pointing it out. It's cleaner than uncertainty, easier than humility. And if there's one thing Salem proved, it's that certainty and fear can do terrible things when they start sharing a bed. So yes, they say, we learnt. They say, we know better now, that we'd never let this happen again. But we always say that, after every fire, after every name carved too late, after every voice silenced while the crowd watched. And maybe some people really do mean it. Maybe some hearts ache with the weight of what happened. Maybe there are those who walk up the hill and feel the wrongness settle in their chest like a stone. But most don't stay long. It's uncomfortable. And we've gotten very good at avoiding discomfort, especially the kind we caused. Salem didn't become a lesson. It became a brand. It became folklore. It became Halloween decorations and walking tours. We turned tragedy into something marketable, into something that draws visitors and sells candles. You can buy books that retell your story, printed with gold foil and thick paper, and no mention of what the floor smelled like in your cell. The pain was real, the injustice was real, but the memory is curated. And that's what we call learning. You didn't make it, that's the truth of it. You did everything you were supposed to do. You prayed, you obeyed, you kept your head down, you answered every question, or you didn't. Maybe you stayed silent. Maybe you raised your voice. Maybe you fought. Maybe you wept. It didn't matter. The outcome was already written. You were born in the wrong time, in the wrong place, with the wrong kind of presence, too quiet to be forgettable, too strange to be harmless, too honest to survive the noise. And now your story ends where so many others did, on a hill with no marker, in a jail with no light, in a record book full of slanted ink and missing pages. But you were not alone. There were others beside you, others still to come. People misunderstood, mistrusted, mislabeled, caught in the grinding teeth of fear, and called evil for the crime of being inconvenient. You joined a long line of the accused, and though they buried your body, they could never bury the weight of what they did to you. That weight still lingers. in the stone foundations of the old meeting house, in the crooked fence line behind your garden, in the chill that creeps up the back of the neck on certain nights when the wind sounds a little too much like a whisper. People still speak your name, not always yours exactly, but one like it, a stand-in, a symbol, a figure. You became the witch in the cautionary tale, the one children dress up as, the one tourists search for in the fog. They don't know you, but they remember something, and maybe that's enough. So now, let the gallows grow moss. Let the ledgers turn to dust. Let the wrongs remain visible, unburied, unforgotten. Let the weight of what was done settle into the bones of this place like the cold. Let no one look away too quickly. Let your story be told. Let it end with your own silence, not theirs. Close your eyes now. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to be strong. The rope is gone. The crowd has left. The night is yours again. You did not deserve this, but you endured it. And now, finally, you can rest. Good night, witch.